Okay, David Fumberger. What an awesome name. David Fumberger has built more iPad apps and iPhone apps than I can even name here. But my favourite one is Beatwave. We're running a little late, so that's all I'll say. David, Mr. Fumberger, please come to the stage.
All right, hello. First, I'd just like to say thanks to one more thing for having me here today, the very first conference. I reckon it's great to see along with having so much awesome iOS development talent here in Melbourne and Australia. They're also lucky enough to have events like these. So it's really, really exciting. Well, my name's David Fumberger, and I'm from a company called Collect3. I also represent Collect3's sister company, Revolutionary Concepts. Between the two companies, we've released over 20 apps on the store that have been downloaded over 5 million times. So here are some of our apps that we've developed over the last 3 years. Hopefully you'll recognise maybe a few of them, but if not, maybe go download some. We can have a bit of money to put towards our petrol for today. So for each one of these apps that we've developed, the process has been sort of something like this. We'll come up with an idea. We'll generally think it's the best idea we've ever had for an app. We'll get really excited by that idea and dive sort of headfirst straight into development. Something happens, and then hopefully we can just sort of sit back and watch the dollars roll in. There always seems to be a missing part just before the profit part here, but luckily I've got the answer today, and that missing part is releasing the app onto the App Store. And this is kind of what I want to talk about a little bit today. So I'm not going to talk so much about our story, but with the 20 apps we released, I think if there's one thing we maybe know over all that experience is how to get an app out there on the store. So firstly, I want to discuss a little bit about how to make sure your app gets out in a suitable time frame. Saying we kind of throw around the office a lot is that it's done when it's done. But finding, I think, the perfect time for release can be possibly the difference between success and failure sometimes with these apps. If you release too early, the product may not live up to expectations. But if you take too long, it could never see the light of day. And the second point I want to talk about is what makes version 1 of an app. And looking at deciding on what should and probably shouldn't go into the first and subsequent releases. So starting with development time, one place that we start thinking about how long your app should take to develop is how long do other apps take to develop? And this is kind of a question we get a lot when discussing apps, and we generally can't resist with responding with this long. Sure, we've all heard that. This is going to be as long as a piece of string, right? For us, the development time for each app has varied greatly depending on the project. Each app has a different scope, and so there's never really a hard and fast rule as to how long one of these things should take. So here are some of the development times for a few of the apps that we've developed. This first one here was XBeam Stereo Remote. This was the very first app that we developed. This sort of took a bit longer than it would for me to develop today, mainly because it was first experience with Objective-C, UIKit and the iPhone as a whole. UFO on Tape was another app that we developed in around 3 weeks. This was sort of based on an existing prototype, and so we had a bit of the design, the art already done, and a lot of it was mainly the development that needed to be done here. So this sort of gave us a little bit of a head start. And then there was Video Stream, which was an app that allowed you to stream video from your PC or Mac to your iPhone or your iPad. So this required an iPhone and an iPad client, as well as a Mac and a Windows server. And this one took quite a while relative to sort of all the other apps that we've done to get out the door. Then lastly, there was Gesundheit, which is a game we just released about 2 weeks ago. Maybe a few of you have heard about it. This was quite a big project. It had a game with 40 levels. There's a lot of art and gameplay in this. And it had 2 coders, 1 artist and 1 project manager. But even sort of with all those resources, that still took us 5 months to get out the door. So clearly, the development time, for an app can sort of vary greatly depending on many factors. For the apps that we've developed, I think these 4 factors here have probably influenced the development time. Obviously, while we always like to shorten the development time as much as possible, each project is clearly going to be different and must be treated as so. When I started on my first app, XBMC Remote, I still had a day job. I was working for a large company developing enterprise software. Projects would have sort of large budgets and teams. We'd have endless pages of technical and functional specifications and meticulously crafted project plans. And so only really after weeks or sometimes months of planning, the first line of code would be laid down, and kind of from there it would be set in stone. When starting iOS development and working on our own projects, we kind of threw all this away. And all the typical project planning that might occur in a normal software project. One, because the projects are smaller and can benefit from like an organic sort of development approach. But also with a small team, we probably didn't have the luxury of dedicating the time to the extensive planning and design of the application before starting. It's not to say we didn't sort of have a direction of where we're heading, but we traded Word documents for napkins and iterating rather than sort of setting things in stone. So while we enjoy plenty of room to move, the downside is possibly the development of the time the application may blow out. Of course, everyone's different, and some of you, might not be able to start a project without having a proper project plan in place. And this is probably going to be especially true for, say, any contract work that you might do, and that's great. But if you're anything like us, we kind of just love to, jump straight into the projects and kind of ignore all that boring stuff. But really, whether it's a single person coding an app or a team of people, we've still sort of found it necessary to employ a few project management tools to ensure the app gets out in a timely time frame. And these two are tools that we've found the most useful, I think. The first one is writing down a completion date. So maybe an end date might seem fairly obvious to some people, but it's something we've actually omitted for a few of our projects. And really, as a result, the dev length has kind of suffered. With a date, it can have a funny way of motivating people, I think, whether it's yourself or others in the team. And while it's sort of nice to avoid the pressures of a hard deadline, I think it's helpful to have a goal to work towards, and can kind of give you a guide as if you're on track or not. The second is time boxing sort of specific goals. Completion date, while good for a rough guide, doesn't really paint the entire picture. Within the completion date, we kind of like to break down the project into manageable bites, and this helps keep momentum up. But again, it's sort of less about having the pressure to have things completed by a date, but identifying the signposts in the project's life cycle. Here's an example of sort of a plan we might put together for one of our apps. In this case, it was Spout. Clearly, it's quite rough, but even just with this little bit of amount of information about where the project's heading, it gives us a good idea of where the major signposts are going to be during development. But it also gives us sort of an idea that there's sort of other things apart from the actual development to do, which are just as important, as the actual development, which is like the testing, making sure you're set up on the App Store with your copy and description of the app, submitting the app. That always can take quite a while, from 5 to 500 days in some cases, and setting up your support and website and your email. So while not core to the app, these extra things here are definitely needed, and you can't release your app without them. So, but even with a project plan, or a small guide in place, there's always going to be things that are working against, I think, the time that you want to get your project out in. One of these influences is feature creep, and feature creep is common to basically all software projects, whether they're on the desktop, the web, or the iPhone. The temptation is sort of add one more thing because wouldn't it be nice, or it's cool or useful, is always kind of hanging around. And I think feature creep's just not common to sort of software, but like a lot of things in the modern world. And one kind of example I like of that is the everyday boring fridge. So here's what I consider kind of the beta version of the fridge. It's pretty good, keeps the food cool, but could certainly be bigger and have a few more features. So from here, probably a lot of things happen in the fridge world, which I don't really have much idea about. But we might have ended up with, say, this one here. It's pretty good. It's big. It's got a freezer. It keeps everything cool and fresh. What more could you ask for, right? I think someone was asking this at the fridge factory or office, wherever they make fridges, and decided it'd be a good idea to do something like this. They've gone and stuck the internet and a tally on the fridge. And look, personally, I love the internet, and I also love food, but I don't think the two really belong together. I think the internet belonging on the fridge, it's basically just compromising sort of both products. A fridge doesn't need the TV or the internet on it. The fridge itself doesn't really work any better, but suddenly become more complicated, expensive to create, and it takes longer to develop. So I think whether it's like version 1 of your app that you're developing or version 10, feature creep's sort of always something you need to be conscious of. And to make sure you don't end up making a TV when you set out to make a fridge. I think it's important to try and maybe succinctly define the functionality of the app before starting out on it. So one way I like to do this when we're sort of starting to look at an app is give yourself an elevator pitch. The old term elevator pitch refers to the ability to be able to sell someone on an idea in the short amount of time it takes to ride an elevator. And this can kind of be effective to apply when determining the overall scope of an app that you're developing. So this would be, say, a short paragraph that encapsulates all of what your app can do and help give a clear definition to sort of the goal and the scope of the app. So an example of this, I'll use one of our apps, Picture Safe. Someone might ask, maybe you're asking right now, what's Picture Safe? And we reply with our elevator pitch. Now, Picture Safe is an app that allows a user to store password-protected images on the device. So that gives us like a really clear definition of what the app needs to achieve. But as we're developing Picture Safe, we might say, hey, wouldn't it be cool to sort of add the crop and retouch functions to the pictures stored in the app? Referring to the app definition, this can sort of be a reminder that this was not the original intent of the app. Adding features like this could push the scope out of the app entirely. Though, of course, that's not to say that if you felt it was a really killer feature, you'd be forced to leave it out. The reality of the store could mean that a competitor, released a similar app with all those features while we're developing, and so we could consider updating our definition to include this. So here we've added 4 more words to our elevator pitch, but you can see that just adding those 4 more words has basically changed what the app does really significantly. So this is sort of one useful tool we like to use to combat feature creep, and so we hope other people might sort of find that idea useful as well. So this is another kind of thing to keep in mind when developing an app and planning a feature set for the first release. I think it's important to remember it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. If you're a perfectionist, I think it can be a hard trap to avoid. There can be constant struggle between trying to work out what is and what isn't core to your app, and what's core to a success and what isn't necessary, say, day one. Of course, you want to release an awesome product and that everyone's going to love and review and give it 5 stars. But I think there should always be probably room to improve and build on that version 1 of your product. As taking the time to build everything in that you think users will want could mean you never release at all. So the point of this is that the App Store allows you to iterate and release, I think, with great ease. You can upload your app, provide the new release notes, and instantly everyone has a new copy of the app. And so it can be sort of a good idea to keep this in mind and take advantage of it. Because of the ease of updates, though, I think users have now been almost conditioned to expect constant updates. So whether it's utility you're adding new features to, or a game you're adding new levels and content to, users are always going to be out there expecting new updates, new content, and they're going to be leaving you reviews to sort of say that. As we plan for more features in the apps that we've developed, we try and remember that we can sort of ship early and and iterate based on the feedback from these great users. Every day we come up with new features for apps that we think would be really cool and really awesome to implement, but can sometimes just end up being a distraction from the core purpose that our app is sort of being used for. This is a philosophy I think that applies to Apple and the way they sort of do their product releases. So one of the most common things you hear about Steve Jobs is that he's a perfectionist. And that's certainly true. He's no doubt he's constantly raising the bar, though that sometimes implies he'll never let a product go out until it is perfect. But I think if you look at the way Apple release products, they appear to prefer what is included as perfect, and if it's not, then it can probably wait. So some examples of this that we could see in iOS would be, say, copy and paste. And I think it was a good example of knowing when to add things based on user feedback. For like ages, all you'd ever hear when someone would talk about the iPhone was, it doesn't have copy and paste. I don't know, maybe Apple felt it wasn't quite ready, or maybe originally decided it wasn't needed at all, but they took the time to do it properly. And when it was released, everyone was happy and it was implemented really, really well. Same with multitasking. It wasn't included in day one. Again, another really huge criticism of the iPhone. It doesn't multitask. It's rubbish. So, Apple did address this, but I think not including it day one allowed Apple to see how users and the apps actually interacted with the OS. And that meant, again, they did a really, really good job of implementing that feature. But this philosophy does not mean that you can really ship buggy or incomplete software. I think it's okay for you to be embarrassed looking back at your version 1 release, but you shouldn't have users out there who are embarrassed for you. For me, this is probably the most terrifying part of releasing an app, which is waiting for that first review to come in. Hopefully, we're going to see glorious 5-star reviews as the first one there. But if the app has an obvious problem, then the 1-star reviews are going to stack up really, really, really quickly. The reputation of an app can dive as quickly as it can rise. So avoiding those bugs obviously is the best thing to do. We've found, if users find a bug or something that isn't quite working right in the software, they're more prone to leave a 1 or 2-star review, regardless of how, say, the rest of the app is functioning. But I think they're much more forgiving when it comes to missing features. They'll still let you know in iTunes reviews that if they want something, you don't make any mistake about that. But I think this is a good thing, as it allows you to tweak the product to meet these users' demand. So sometimes the best way to avoid negative reviews or to avoid bugs and therefore negative reviews is to avoid implementing some of these features in the first place. It'd be better to make sure all the features you have are as good as they absolutely can be, rather than releasing with sort of half-implemented functionality, as ultimately people can't criticise what isn't there. So again, on the initial sort of feature set and deciding on what goes into that or what features may go into future upgrades, another question we ask a lot is this feature suitable for the current app, or does it maybe deserve its own app? When we released our app, Picture Safe, it was a very simple app initially. Basically provided the ability to be able to password protect and store your images on the phone. After Picture Safe was released, we slowly added more features to the application that basically enhanced the goal of importing and storing pictures onto the phone. These features complemented sort of the existing features and the core functionality of the app, and the users were pretty happy. But then at this time, the latest phone was the iPhone 3G. And then in 2009, the iPhone 3G was released with the video function. So not surprisingly, we started getting a lot of requests for, hey, in this app PictureSafe, can you add video to it? And at this point, we had a choice. We said, do we provide a free update to all the existing users with the ability to be able to import and store videos? Or is there an opportunity here for a second product? So we looked at the pros and cons. So the point of adding a large new feature to an existing product keeps users happy, right? Users love new stuff, and especially if it's free. And so, add this into the product, and they'll hopefully go tell their friends that this great app has got even better. But it can be hard to advertise. This example, putting in, say, a video function into a product called PictureSafe, can make it tough to highlight to a user searching for that feature in the store. Because of the way the store is sort of laid out, users will first look at the icon, the title, the rating, and then the short description in that order. So the sooner you can convey what your app does and why the user needs to download it, I think the better. And third point here is there's no flexibility in pricing. So in this example of PictureSafe, are users who want the picture function going to want to pay the same amount as users who want both video and pictures, right? So the flip side of this is creating a new product. In theory, we can create twice as much revenue, which is always good, right? We've got two products out there, so someone can go buy that product twice, or they can appeal to sort of two different users. It's also possible to sell the product to existing users, existing users of the current product, by doing such things as spamming them in your email list or your Twitter, or even the App Store description of the other app. But the downside is, these two products may sort of cannibalise each other. In other words, the downloads of one could eat into the downloads of the other. Both could sort of drop in the charts, and no one would be able to see your app. But look, in the end, we chose the route of going with releasing a second product, which we call VideoSafe. And we put this into the store, same category alongside with PictureSafe. We set the price of this app at $4. So it's pretty much double the price of the existing app. The decision to choose a separate product worked out really well for us. We were able to let the sort of existing customers know, hey, there's this separate product out here if you want to have videos in your product, in your app, and they could upgrade to if they wanted those features. And we didn't really experience sort of any of the major downsides. Both products were and still kind of hover around the number 50 in utilities in the US store, which is really good. Of course, it's not a hard and fast rule and may not be appropriate for all types of apps. But there was a lesson here for us, and there can be a benefit in not overloading an app, keeping its functions simple while still keeping the users happy and bringing in more revenue for us. So, look, just finishing up, the reality is, no software product is ever finished. Ultimately, an unreleased product is going to be better than ultimately a released product is going to be better than an unreleased one. So all I can say is strive to have a great solid base for version 1 of your product, allowing your app room to grow, and trying to make each point release better than the last. Hopefully I've given you a few things to think about in the way you may approach development of your app, and I wish everyone the best of luck with their own version 1. So thank you.
Thank you, David.